Hey there, and welcome back to the What Am I Doing podcast. It has been a while. I know I've missed you guys. Hopefully you've missed me too. But guess what? We have some special stuff happening today. A little while ago, I spoke with Kori Hall about the state of Oklahoma City, things, how it's just been the last year, and honestly, just ways to dive in and participate in your city, be involved with the community, and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep this short. This is going to be a two-parter. Here's part one, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. And just as a forewarning before this, we recorded this in a public coffee shop, so you might hear some background noise. But honestly, I think it's really cool to have recorded in that kind of live setting. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you. Hey everybody, I am here with Kori Hall. We're going to be having a little bit of a conversation about Oklahoma City, what the state of it is, and just kind of what's going on in our local city, just to kind of find out, all the happenings and everything. Kori, I know who you are, but a lot of people might not. So if you could just introduce yourself, what you do.
Yeah, my name is Kori Hall. I have a couple of jobs, but my main space where you find me is at Frontline Church downtown. I work there on our community team doing city engagement and a few other things to help people kind of engage missionally in the city. And then I also work with our city on homeless services, doing things like serving on our city's task force to end homelessness. I serve on the board of City Care OKC, and then do some volunteer work with Restore OKC to help with those areas of homelessness and poverty. And then I also work for Dead Center Film Festival, which kind of gives me an in into the arts community.
Oh man, I didn't know the Dead Center. That's so
Yeah.
cool. So I kind of want to start. What brought you to where you are today? So right now you work with, Restore, Frontline Church, Dead Center, all this stuff. But were you originally in Oklahoma? Did you grow up here? What brought you to Oklahoma City specifically and getting so plugged into it the way you are?
Yeah, so I moved to Oklahoma City in 2009 for an internship. I was working with a ministry team, and their internship program was here in Oklahoma City. I moved here for about 9 months to do that internship program, and then moved away with that team. After a couple of years, I was offered a job back here in Oklahoma City at City Rescue Mission, and so that's what brought me to the city. Before that, I was a military brat. My dad was in the Army. We moved yearly. We moved. Normally every 3 years we would move to a different city. And so I grew up mostly in Germany and kind of was a third culture kid, military culture, German culture, American culture, kind of all blended together. And then when I settled in Oklahoma City, it was about 2011. And I've been in Oklahoma City ever since. So with moving around all the time, I didn't really have a home base, and I really kind of prayed that I would get rooted somewhere, and that became this spot for me. And so the nature of military kids is to know you're not going to be somewhere long, and so you kind of build community, but you don't really build connection with the place that you're living. And over time, I realized that was just not the easiest way to live. And so when I moved here, I really wanted to build not just relational community, but also connection with the city that I was in. And so I poured a lot of time into knowing Oklahoma City, like living it and loving it. And now this place is home. It's been almost 10 years. And so it'll be 10 years next month, which is awesome.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Great timing.
Yeah, it's great.
So you came here for an internship, and so that was in 2009, you
Yes.
said? So is that what
2009 to
actually
10.
helped you plug in, like actually stay in Oklahoma City?
No, it's really funny. So the internship I did was with a ministry team that toured kind of all over the world doing performing arts for middle school and high school students. And so we were based here, but we were always practicing and always on the road. And so my view of Oklahoma City was like our day off was on Sunday, and that was the only time we got to go anywhere. And even then, it was like we would go to the grocery store and home. So I didn't really plug into Oklahoma City then. And if you were around Oklahoma City in 2009, there wasn't a lot downtown that was happening in the way that it's happening now. And so I didn't really get connected. And when I came for that internship program, I had just moved here from Germany. And so the culture shock was huge.
Oh, yeah.
The non-existent culture that I had missed in Germany of being constantly involved in the city, there being a lot of arts and history and all these things going on. And then I moved to Oklahoma City, and our actual like headquarters were in Choctaw. It was a very huge culture shock, and so
wow.
I did not really spend any time that year plugging into the city. When I moved back in 2011 and started working downtown, that was like my first introduction really to Oklahoma City and kind of what it had to offer. And I think a lot of people sold the city short when I first moved here and said, like, you know, Oklahoma City's kind of basically a small town. There's not much to do here. And then when I moved back in 2011, I realized there was actually a lot to do if you got connected and really jumped in. And so I started looking for volunteer opportunities kind of from the beginning. And one of the first places I volunteered was Dead Center Film Festival.
Okay.
And that was in 2011, and so it's been almost 10 years of volunteering with them, which has moved into sort of working for them part-time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So do you like do organization or help with like events and stuff?
Yeah,
or?
I am the festival coordinator, so I coordinate the festival that we have downtown underneath their executive director, who Alex Picard Davis runs the festival, and they've got a really small staff team of 3 people, one of which is part-time, and then we've got a team of contractors that jump in during the festival season, like myself, to help with some of the bigger projects, like putting on this massive festival. And mostly through the rest of the year, I just kind of hang out and help with however, like, any ways that I can. But kind of seeing the importance of arts and film to the Oklahoma City community,
Yeah.
seeing how Dead Center has been able to thrive for 20 years in a place where many people probably didn't realize had such a dedicated like film and art space. They've kind of like really brought that to life, along with the Arts Festival and the Oklahoma Film and Music Office and all of those places. So that was kind of my first intro into what the city had to offer. And from there, it was getting involved in more of the events that happen on a regular cycle to meet people and really find out what Oklahoma City was all about.
Yeah, that seems like a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And I know that festival is like really cool.
It's really
I've been
awesome.
to it, so.
Yeah. And, you know, it's with 3 people on staff, it's basically hundreds of volunteers that make the festival happen. And so that's a huge thing, because without volunteers, they wouldn't be able to do what they do.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of the big like milestone events in Oklahoma City, like the Memorial Marathon and the Arts Festival, those things don't happen without massive numbers of volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to find people to do that. And so for me, it's always trying to help people who live here realize that they can jump into the cultural life of the city by stepping into volunteer.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I've noticed about Oklahoma City specifically is like the Dead Center. There's only like 3 staff members, or like even with the Memorial Run, there's not really many people who are dedicated like people for that. But
Yeah.
it completely relies on volunteers.
Yeah, they have a tiny team who does a lot of really awesome work, but they need those volunteers, or there's no way that they could do a, you know, run that's 26 miles long.
Oh,
around the
yeah.
city.
I've even volunteered for that.
Yeah.
And honestly, like even just volunteering, like seeing like the overwhelming just sensation of so many people and things happening all at the same time.
It's cool.
So what does the Dead Center Festival do kind of like on the off season?
Yeah, so the festival is in June. In the off season, we do a lot of education, partnering with the local schools and colleges to teach kids about the film industry. And so occasionally I'll go with them to different schools and teach kids how to use virtual reality equipment, or how to write a script, or how to think through a storyboard or a concept. They do a lot of education with the colleges and helping kids to learn what it looks like to step into internships. And so Dead Center has an internship program, and those interns kind of help with the festival preparations before the festival starts.
Oh, wow.
And then they also do some partnerships with the Film and Music Office, helping with shoots that are happening here, getting filmmakers advice on how to submit their films into the festival circuit. And then the director of Dead Center is also on the like Film Festival Alliance Board, which is a national organization. And so she does a lot of education with other people who run film festivals in different cities to help them learn how to shift into this new virtual world that we're moving into.
Wow.
So they do a lot for a tiny team, and it's really cool to see. And then they help people stay like socially engaged with all of the smaller theaters and smaller festivals that are starting to pop up around Oklahoma, because now there's a few smaller festivals that are showing up
You guys help out with those as well?
Yeah, they kind of help with some of the like training and mentoring for those.
Okay.
And, yeah, so they do that, and then they have their office space on Film Row, so they also do a lot of stuff throughout the calendar year, partnering with the Film Row Alliance to help bring people into downtown.
Do they kind of partner with the Arts Council for some of the things?
Yeah, for a few things. So
okay.
It's really cool to see the way that a lot of the nonprofits and the way that a lot of the arts organizations partner together to put on different events. Even the way that like the city parks and the venues kind of all help to make those things happen.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID this year, people have been willing to like share their spaces or utilize different spaces to make things happen, or to move things to a virtual environment just to see people jump in to say like, hey, I don't know how to do this, but we'll figure it out together. I think has been a benefit of like this season that we're in, us having to learn all those things together. People in Oklahoma have always just been the type of people that are willing to jump in and help with whatever gets put in front of them.
Oh, yeah.
And so that, I think, is a benefit of this type of culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last year, I guess since everything kind of started in March, how did that affect the festival? I don't know if you guys did a virtual thing or anything like that. What did you guys end up doing last year? Even with like, I guess going around and teaching, like and having an internship and everything. Like, how did that affect everything last year?
It's so interesting. At the beginning of the year, we were still going places and doing things, and then the kind of shutdown felt imminent in Dead Centers in June. So in March, it was like, this doesn't feel like it's going to be a short-term thing, so we need to pivot. And so last year's festival was 90% online. All the films were accessed virtually, and we did a few small screenings in person outdoors at like Scissortail Park and the Winchester Drive-In. It was a great venue to use. But for the most part, it was like a really hard pivot into a whole different type of system. And the team at Dead Center did an amazing job of figuring out how to make that work. But it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of long days and testing things and figuring out a way to have thousands of people access films all at the same time.
Yeah.
People to be able to like bookmark their spots and check on which specific directors they wanted to see. We also recorded tons of Zoom Q&As with all of the directors.
Oh, wow.
And people in the films, because one of the highlights of the festival is being able to hear from the actual artists themselves about their projects. And with us doing the festival virtually, we didn't want to miss out on those things. So we recorded a lot of Zoom calls and interviews with people in the industry to get to explore their projects with them, even though they weren't there in person. So it all worked out really well. It was just sad to miss the big Dead Center things that people look forward to, like our parties, which we didn't get to have.
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully getting to do some of that in the next upcoming years.
Yeah. So do you guys have like an idea what this year might look like? Because we're a little better, but not really.
Keeping things under wraps for now.
Okay.
But we're looking at all the potential of what that could look like in this next season with the vaccine coming out and lots of different changes that may be happening to our like city policies. But also knowing that it could look very similar to what last year looked like.
Possibly a lot of like online stuff.
Things could be a huge piece of it, but still staying hopeful and seeing what that will be. But I felt like people responded just as well to the virtual environment as they did to the in-person. Yeah,
that's kind of something I wanted to know. Like Zoom, everybody hates Zoom now. Like it's almost like he who shall not be named. But like, did the Zoom Q&As go well?
Yeah, it actually worked really well because we pre-recorded a lot of material. We were able to edit those things in a way that didn't feel like a weird Zoom call. And because they were accessing them through a different platform, it didn't feel like, oh, sit and listen to this Zoom Q&A. It was like, I get to have, this interview after I just watched this film that this director made that's attached to the movie, so I don't have to like go click another link or do anything like that. So people responded really well to it. I think people are always just excited about the quality of films that are going to be in the festival. And for people who really love independent film, who love international film, who love short films, this is the like place to be to see those things. Yeah. And so they just get excited that we have that level of content and quality content in Oklahoma City. And so we try to make sure people have access to like a list of what films we're going to have. We try to really recruit people who are going to bring quality films We feature Oklahoma filmmakers, but there are filmmakers from all over the world that enter into Dead Center, and so that gives a lot of room to really have like quality, fun content for people to enjoy. So I think it's going to be an awesome festival this year too. And Dead Center's added a new staff person to the team who has a real like just good edge to figuring out new technology and new things that we can add. So I feel like 2021 is going to be like a whole new Dead Center, and I think people are going to be really excited about what they have to offer.
Man, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Even no matter if it's online or even if we get to do some in person, I think it's going to be cool.
It will be fun.
So, just a little bit of a turn.
Yeah.
So you moved here in 2011. You started jumping in with them. What else did you like? So, questions. Words are hard apparently. How did you actually start getting connected into the city?
Yeah.
So you said that you kind of worked for
City Rescue Mission.
City Rescue Mission, and I know you've done a couple other things as well.
Yeah.
So like, what was your kind of adventure start of jumping into Oklahoma City and what it is?
Yeah, so I was working for City Rescue Mission, which is a nonprofit that works in homeless services. That was my background. So all of the jobs that I've held in Oklahoma City are social work related. When I started working there, I was volunteering part-time at different events around the city just to kind of get a feel for what the city was like. And what I realized pretty quickly is that it was kind of divided into, in a lot of ways, the haves and have-nots. There's a lot of poverty in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma City particularly, there's like a defined line that kind of felt like, oh, there are places in this city where people are unaware of the levels of poverty that other people in the same city are facing. And so that was kind of a problem that was settling in front of me that made me a little restless and kind of wanting to figure out how to navigate that and step into ways that I could contribute to helping in that problem. And also still learning social work. At that time, I was a lot earlier in my career, so I was new to the field, really learning how to do my job well, and then learning that Oklahoma City has a small population in comparison to some of the other cities I had lived in over the years, but has a really large footprint as far as square miles go. And so I was still really figuring out and understanding the fact that it's really hard to navigate a city this size and get resources. When I first moved here coming from Germany, Germans love public transportation, and you can't get your license in Germany until you're 18. And so I did not drive. And when I moved to Oklahoma City, I did not have a driver's license or a car. And it was really difficult to get around the public transportation here.
I mean, we're still struggling with public transportation.
Still
I know that downtown area was back then, I lived here in 2010. So it was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard to get around.
It's still not that easy. It's improved a lot for sure, but there's still so much more improvement needed. But I didn't have a way to get around anywhere. I was, taking taxis occasionally, walking, riding my bike, and then taking public transit. And the bus line was pretty limited, and I worked nights, and so trying to get to and from work at times when the bus did not run. So it was challenging, which helped me to realize I really needed to learn the city, figure out how to help, and see was the city itself working on any of these issues that I noticed. And I knew that in a city this size, there had to be people already thinking about these things. There had to be, focus groups and city councilors and all of these things that were working on these issues.
Yeah.
But I just didn't really hear anything about it. And part of that was I realized it's not day-to-day conversation for most people, but it is for some people, and I knew I needed to meet those people. Who's talking about this, who cares about these things, who spends their time and their life and their energy wanting to fix these issues, and starting to make connections there. So I started volunteering at places. I started frequenting the same restaurants, coffee shops, libraries, just to start to know the people in the neighborhoods. And that helped me build a relationship with people who felt passionate about the same issues that I did. And as I grew in my experience in social work, then I also figured out, this is a space that I want to stay in. And so I transitioned from working at City Rescue Mission to working for City Care and working at the day shelter with the Homeless Alliance. And City Care and the Homeless Alliance are two organizations I just have massive respect for.
Mm-hmm.
And working there kind of increased my knowledge exponentially. And I was able to really work alongside a team of people who are super gifted and who have a ton of expertise in the area that I was working in. And so that helped me to really shape like a community vision for how we can solve these problems, and specifically how to end homelessness and serve people who are in poverty. And so I realized, like, if you're going to do that, you've got to know your city. You need to know the statistics. You need to know where people live and what the neighborhoods are like. And you need to know what people in, West OKC want. You need to know what people on the South Side want, because they're not the same. You need to know why the culture downtown is so different than it is north of the highway. And that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like easy information to find if you know where you're looking. And so I felt like if I could just learn a few of those things, it's not like I had to dedicate my whole life to it.
Right.
But just like taking some time to find out some things about the city that you're in is a huge way to not just help the city itself or the people in the city, but to also help yourself navigate it. So I think that was one of the things that I did that felt significant, and like the long-term health of me wanting to live in Oklahoma City and stay here was finding ways to connect to it and know it, that weren't just like where I go to work and where I hang out and where I live.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a deeper knowledge of the city that I think a lot of people miss out on, because they're so focused on work and home life that you kind of miss the social dynamics of your city, and those social dynamics can add a lot of life to your own dynamics at home.
Yeah. So I know that you said like you wanted to do that stuff so you could like try to get into groups of people who knew what was going on and stuff like that. So on that side of gathering that information, was that pretty easy? Like I know you said like, you go to coffee shops just to kind of get to know other people who had the same passions, but I know that, there's kind of like a closed section of people in Oklahoma City who really discuss that stuff in detail. Was that like kind of an easy thing to step into?
Yeah, I felt like there were a lot of people who were really welcoming. There was a lot of information available online that was helpful to read and hear. And then, there were things like city council meetings are always open to the public, and being able to hop in to a city council meeting is easier than ever now because they're over Zoom.
Yeah.
But just getting to sit in and kind of hear what issues the city is working on, to see like what requests people are bringing to the city, to be able to even just like hop on the email list of your city councilor, to know who your city councilor is, so that if something's actually wrong in your area, you can like pop in and help. Those things are really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like those are some things I would even just suggest to people as like a first step. It's like find out who your city councilor is, get signed up for their email updates. If you can, city council meetings are during the day, so it might be hard, but if you can, pop into a city council meeting or go online after they're done and kind of read about what happened. And then I think one way that's super unique for Oklahoma is Oklahoma City has a really like well-developed Twitter community.
Yeah.
And a lot of other cities don't utilize Twitter the same way that we do, but Oklahoma City people talk to each other on Twitter almost as if it was Slack, and they were chatting in a giant Oklahoma City Slack chat room.
Yep.
So I feel like if you just get on Slack and start looking for people who live in Oklahoma City, you can follow lists of people who live in Oklahoma City. A good place to start is like the people who work for the news stations, the city councilors, start following them, and then you'll get a grid on like what the chatter is in Oklahoma City, and just jump right in. I think people are so friendly here and so willing to like hear from other people, their opinions of the city, that you'll always find room for yourself in those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, even the times that I haven't been able to tune into a meeting, I think it's been really cool because like I can have my phone set up with Twitter, and like people live tweet what's going on in the meeting, like oh, here are the minutes, like here's what they last talked about, here's like, and I just really think that's cool, because if you're like, I don't really want to watch it, I don't really want to pay attention that much, but like you can still follow with that. Yeah. So no, you're totally right. That's a good way to jump into.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like you wouldn't think Oklahoma to be like like a Twitter like central area hub.
Yeah.
We're you're not wrong. We actually are really good at communicating through it.
Yeah, it's really funny. I talk to friends who live in other cities and they don't utilize Twitter that way. They don't really know where their Twitter friends live. Like,
Yeah.
they don't even realize that there are people who they follow that live in their own city. But we kind of use it as like a community chat room. And so there are people who will be like, hey, I've got 2 free tables. Does anybody want them? And they're tweeting that out to like literally all of Twitter, but they know that only Oklahoma City people are
Oh yeah.
on their feeds. And so that has been a helpful thing. And then, yeah, I feel like there are so many cool community groups like the Rotary Club, getting involved with ULI, getting involved with any of those organizations can help you meet the people that care about the things you care about. And for people who aren't quite sure yet what they care about, it's like you don't have to make long-term commitments to anything. Just jump into a few small conversations or volunteer opportunities, and then you'll start to figure out what it is that you care about in Oklahoma City. Because there's so many different things it could be. It could be, poverty. It could be education. It could be arts. It could be sports. There's just so many ways to jump in and get involved. And I always even see new ideas of people who OKC Energy has a ton of really cool fan support. And a lot of those people are like, I just really like soccer, and you guys happen to have a team. So when I moved here, I jumped into a fan group, and now I've met my closest friends.
Yep.
Because I think for a lot of people, trying to find friends after college can be difficult. And so trying to find affinity groups, people who like the same things, is an easy way to find friends. In a community where a lot of people are working a lot and have home responsibilities, you got to find ways to still make room for friendship.
Mm-hmm. I mean, heck, even my dad and his wife stepped into like the Thunder. Like they're huge Thunder fans, but they've legitimately made probably like 20 to 30 friends, like actual people they would have over for dinner and stuff like that, through just the group of people that they meet at Thunder games or even online talking about the Thunder.
Yep.
Oklahoma's really weird like that. I feel, people connect over like sports or like, like the water area, like all that stuff. But like Oklahoma does that more so with sports and with different things.
Yeah, and it's a good way to like bridge some of the cultural gaps that we have here. Oklahoma is unfortunately a strange state in that it was started by taking native land, and in the midst of that, indigenous people have kind of been put in the back seat of the cultural conversations that happen here, even though they should be the leading voice in our cultural conversations.
Yeah.
And our cities are segregated and pocketed culturally. There's, different people groups that just don't have a lot of spaces to mix. And so some of that is like by choice and some of it is by design, unfortunately. And so in that, trying to find things that people have in common to bridge those cultural gaps and divides can just be huge ways to start to overcome some of those things. And I think as we start to see that happening, those barriers will start to break and crumble. And I think people will have a better understanding of each other and then also of like our shared history. When I first moved to Oklahoma, I really didn't have a good grid for anything that had happened here.
Yeah.
I grew up overseas, and my knowledge of America was kind of limited to the states that I had lived in short spurts, which was California and Texas. And so I didn't understand anything about Oklahoma culture. I knew the musical Oklahoma, and I knew that there were lots of cowboys here. My knowledge of like what had happened, like with the land run and those types of things, had been learned through American history books. And then when I moved overseas, the knowledge kind of shifted to like, maybe American history books are leaving out huge chunks of this story. And as I started to do more research and as I started to build relationships with indigenous people, I just realized that there was a lot that people who lived here for generations have missed out in learning about the history of Oklahoma and its founding, that give them a skewed perspective on what this state is. And I hope to see more education happen in that space, but I tried to make sure that I'm following indigenous leaders in our community to get a perspective on Native American voices here. Oklahoma has so many tribes. Oklahoma City even has so many tribes that make up the indigenous population, and wanting to kind of just respectfully learn about their culture. And then we have a thriving Hispanic and Latinx community here. We have a thriving Muslim community. We have thriving communities of all sorts. There's a refugee community. So like all of these people coming together in one city that's so spread apart, it makes it easy for people to kind of pocket in their own spaces. But then there are these massive things that bring us together, like sports and events, where we can like build those cross-cultural bridges. And so I think people need to take like advantage of that. I feel like our schools are starting to see a need for that and focusing on that.
Oh yeah.
Even as I've seen like the new development plans for our school districts, they're really thinking through the fact that like in the next 10 years, the makeup of Oklahoma City's population, demographic wise, is going to be so different, and they're looking to serve the kids who will be here. And I think even as adults, we have to start thinking about that. And kind of get over ourselves and step out of our comfort zones and learn more about the other people who occupy the city.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny to think that sports like is one of the things bringing people together. What other? I know like we're seeing that like you said in schools, like it's kind of something we're having to look towards, like neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are changing. Like probably, I mean, this is probably the easiest example, but like the plaza, like it's completely different than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like even 5 years ago, you probably didn't want to hang out there very long, but now it's kind of a completely different area.
Yeah.
Kind of being a pocketed city. Do you kind of see like the way that the neighborhoods are changing, the way that kind of populations are kind of shifting?
Yeah.
Is that kind of something that we should keep our eyes out, probably within even like the next year or two?
Yeah, I mean, I would say even like the next day or two. Yeah, when I first moved here, I lived downtown, and then I moved to Mesta Park, which is still considered downtown. But I would ride my bike across Classen to go hang out in the plaza, and still really love the neighborhood, but it has shifted a lot in the last 5 years, and is trying to incorporate different types of businesses and see what works and what doesn't, and still hold on to some of its roots. And in that process, like we've lost some of the like businesses that I would have said 4 to 5 years ago were staple plaza businesses. And if you were to ask me like, what's your spot in the plaza, both of the spots I would like think about are not there anymore. And that's sad, but it also makes room for some new spaces to come in who probably also care about the plaza in that same way. But then it also leaves room for businesses to come in for like economic opportunity, which is not always a bad thing, but a lot of times economic opportunity can outweigh like cultural appreciation or neighborhood appreciation. So I really value the groups that are trying to think about how to save the heart and spirit of a neighborhood and still make room for development, because neighborhoods will die without development or without care from the city to keep the neighborhoods alive. And the residents in those neighborhoods care so deeply for them, but a lot of times they don't have the resources to do the things that need to like make them survive. Unfortunately, with that comes like all of these opportunities for like chains to go in, for gentrification to happen. That's kind of
the thing in my head that I've been thinking about is like, how do we make sure this is a change of good and not just like corporations, chains, and then just like making it look great and feel like, oh man, this is a place I go to because we're hip and cool. But like, what about like the surrounding like local businesses that make, like you said, like those two that have been kind of output since you know you've been visiting them, and like how do we make sure that those kind of places, or even just like the houses there, the people who live there, aren't just shoved out of the way for like really cool locations?
That's a really difficult thing to do. I think that people need to like learn how to advocate for themselves, and people who already know how to advocate for themselves need to step in to advocate for those who can't. A city has to be committed at like a government level to like preservation being a part of their urban development plan. And I think that Oklahoma City has that in mind, but it's also a very sprawling city, and so they can't commit to all 620 square miles being
Oh yeah.
the same.
I mean,
know?
it's cool that like we're one of the biggest cities, but
Yeah.
at the same time, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot.
Yes, very much so.
Do you think like they've been doing a good job of at least trying to pay mind to that recently?
Yeah, I think they think about it often, but there's just no way to spread the amount of like the small amount of financial resources that our city has across all corners of it and satisfy all the needs that need to be met.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of a constant running joke that like every time the city fills a pothole appears somewhere else. And that's like a joke, but it's also like a probably a literal thing that's happening. There's no way to maintain that many square miles of road with the amount of money that we have. And I do personally think that the city puts money towards a lot of things it does not need to, but there's also the like problem of a city government has a lot of moving pieces and a lot of people who have positions of power over those things that are not me. So while I would do things a lot differently and divest money from certain parts of the city budget to put into the other parts of the city budget, the city manager and the city councilors and the mayor have to figure out how to make those things work, which is why we have all these weird tax programs like MAPS to fill in the gap for the ways that our taxes don't cover. I feel like we could divest a lot of resources from certain parts of the city government and function and move them to things that would help kind of spread that out.
Yeah.
But I know that they're thinking about it because the new MAPS program, one of the biggest budget items is parks. And in the last 10 years, they made this massive investment into like Scissortail Park, which is downtown in the core, and it's awesome. But all the parks around the city, as large as our city is, need attention. Mm-hmm. And so now they're going to start spreading out to like all the parks in all the corners of Oklahoma City, getting renovations, getting updated lights and landscaping and all these other things, so that everybody can enjoy what the people downtown have been enjoying for a while. I think about the people that live in Oklahoma City but basically live in Jones. Like they should have a park. I have a park that's literally 2 minutes walking distance from my house, and then I have another park 5 minutes walking distance from my house, and then another park 7 minutes walking distance from my house, because I live in the core. And I appreciate those things, but I know people who live in the city who don't have a park that they can walk to with their kids, and they should have one. And so I'm excited to see those things happen. But I think like if people understood how large our city was, it would help put into perspective the things that they see that they like complain about. Like potholes, they're a terrible problem and we need to fix them.
They really are.
But it's like when you realize that like that one street isn't in a list of 250 streets that need to be resurfaced in the next year, and then there's another list for the next 10 years, it starts to put into perspective like, oh man, we got a lot of work to do, a very little amount of money to do it, and a lot of people thinking about how to make it happen. So we got to start thinking broadly about how to have enough resources to do those things. And I think a lot of people turn to like, well, we need to bring more businesses here, we need to bring more economic development here, which then brings gentrification, which then brings displacement, and those things are like a hard balance. So while I don't have like a solution to all of it, I think that we've got to like keep preservation in mind, keep cultural history in mind, and know that like development's going to happen and it needs to happen in some ways. But if we displace people to make that happen, we're sacrificing something that we can't get back. And I don't want to see us do that, especially in a city as diverse as this. That we sacrifice the beauty of our diversity for like economic development. Because that's just sad. And you see cities that have like kept that integrity, and it's made the city better in the long run. We don't want to have like a city that I could have built on The Sims. The city that we live in, you know, where it's just like place things where they need to go and there's no heart to it. So I want Oklahoma City to be that. I don't know if Oklahoma City wants to be that.
That's fair. It's hard for a lot of people to understand that like it's up to you, and that's, you know, it sounds cheesy, but like it really is up to you. Do you think there's like, or do you know of any ways for like, okay, so we have our city branch, like you have the city trying to think of all this. But like you said, just as an example, like that road might not even be in the top 250 streets that need to be fixed. Do you think there's localized ways to do that? Like maybe even smaller sections to jump in and like even have those like, because there's like the village, there's all these Nichols Hills, different areas of Oklahoma City. Do you think like you could step in even more locally than just OKC, maybe into like that area, like the Mesta, stuff like this, to actually maybe help get stuff done?
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated because like the village and Nichols Hills are both their own cities, so they have their own city governments that don't function with like Oklahoma City. But then you have your neighborhoods inside of Oklahoma City, like Mesta Park, like Quail Creek, like Capitol Hill, like Northeast Renaissance, that are just specific neighborhoods, but they have neighborhood associations, and that's a huge place for people to jump in and get involved. So most neighborhoods have a neighborhood association. Those are the people that plan like your neighborhood block parties, your neighborhood Christmas decorations, all of those things, who are always looking for volunteers, always looking for people to kind of serve and help the neighborhood. They are the ones who take care of a lot of the like smaller level things that happen in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to get involved. For people who do live in some of those smaller towns that are encompassed in Oklahoma City but not actually a part of it, like Nichols Hills and the Village and Valley Brook and all of these other little tiny pockets. So sad for Valley Brook. They're such a strange town. But they're like inside of Oklahoma City, so they benefit from like the fact that they're near a city, but they're their own thing. Like they also have city councils and they also have elections, and they're smaller, so there's like a different level of participation. Like I know the Village is about to have city council elections, and so they're probably looking for people to step into those positions and to step in to help knock doors for the people who are running. So like getting online and seeing when those happen. And then in Oklahoma City proper, for sure, joining neighborhood associations. Like my next door neighbor is the president of my neighborhood association, and he's always asking for like people to jump in. And it could be super little things, but like we just have a block party that happens once a year that is like an easy way for people to jump in and volunteer. Yeah. And we have monthly meetings, and you know there's hundreds of people who live in our neighborhood, but like a dozen show up. And so it's like jumping into those things is an easy way. And then even at the city level, like Oklahoma City council meetings are like a big thing, and all of that. But with all the new projects they have going on, they have smaller subcommittees. And if you go on the city's website, like okc.gov, there's a list of all the different committees in a city that people who are volunteers can serve on. So you could serve on like the airport committee or the traffic and roads committee. You could serve on the Lake Hefner and water supply committees. There's all these different things like that. They're volunteer positions that you can self-nominate for, and those are the people who kind of help make the decisions alongside of the actual city staff to make sure those things are working.
Yeah.
There's like dozens and dozens of those positions that regularly come open. And then there's committees for all the MAPS projects too, that people can apply for to serve on. And some of those are short-term commitments and some are longer, but they're like super easy ways to jump in to like learn more about how the city works.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of like in that, kind of know about your city, what's going on and stuff like that. What is one thing you'd tell people like what would you say is probably the easiest way to step in, even if like you don't have that much time committal, like if you just like, I want to know what's going on and be able to step in if and when I can.
Yeah.
But this isn't something that like, hey, I'm going to step in, like I'm going to actually be on a board or a committee. Like what is something that like a normal person could do to just on a weekly, daily basis be mindful and step into?
Yeah, just like follow the city on Twitter or Instagram. Super easy way. The city has an Instagram account. They have a Twitter account. They have a Facebook page, and they update with information about what's happening in the city. And so naturally, you'll see things that are going on, and then can like go Google search and find a volunteer opportunity if you want to. But also, it just helps to be informed. And so that's a super simple way. If your day is like packed out, you have no time to actually step in to volunteer. Just be aware of what's happening, and so follow those things. All of the news stations and news media has social, and so I think that's a super easy way to know what's happening. The like hardest thing is to like hear people say that there's nothing to do here and that Oklahoma City sucks and that it's a terrible place to live.
Yeah.
And then really when I talk to them and learn what's going on, it's like, no, you work all of the time and you haven't gotten outside of your work environment enough to know what's happening, or you're disconnected from what's happening socially, and so your assumption is that there's nothing to do. And so connecting in a way, whatever way you connect, whether it's social media or whether it's traditional media, but like staying connected. So those are the easiest ways. Like follow the city online, and they'll post things about what's happening. And then also the city's website has an events calendar of all the things that are happening in Oklahoma City all throughout the year. The Chamber of Commerce also keeps one of those, but there's like calendars online that you can look at and figure out what's going on. And then if you've got kids, a super easy way is to follow Metro Family. They're great. Like they put out a newsletter or magazine. They have a website where they update about all the events that are happening for kids and families, posting stuff that's free. So anytime I have a friend with kids and they're like, I don't know what to do with my kids this week, I'm like, go to Metro Family's website, look at their calendar. They will tell you every like free place where you can go pick berries and every park that's got a thing going on and which museums have free passes for the weekend or special exhibits, to like actually know what's happening.
Yeah.
And then you've got places like the OK Gazette that posts like a monthly calendar of all the arts and music and all those events that are happening.
Yep.
They're great to follow. Pre-COVID, if you wanted to know who was playing at any venue, that's the place that you can go look. And then the other thing is I recommend following either on social media or just routinely checking the websites of all of our venues in the city. Tower Theater, the Civic Center, the Jones Assembly, the event center out at Rose State, the one in Norman.
Yeah.
There's so many events that happen, and I know with COVID it's a little bit tricky, but even now those places are still hosting virtual events. They're hosting live streaming concerts. So start to follow them and you'll see what's happening in the city. And then you'll start to find your favorite places, your favorite people, your favorite things to do. And it will help you feel more plugged in and involved. And I think those are ways that are like super easy, low committal, just learning about where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much
for sure.
Talking about just kind of ways to plug in. And I know that there's a lot. Like there's honestly, like you just mentioned like probably 30 things like within the last couple of minutes. But honestly, that's super helpful. Yeah. Like even the Metro Family, like I didn't know about that, but that's not something I've ever had to plug into. Yep. So like
I use it for myself because I love fall. And Oklahoma has a great fall season, but I'm like, what is there to do in Oklahoma City in the fall? Well, they have a list of like every pumpkin patch and every orchard, and like so me and my friends went to go pick apples. It's like,
oh man, that's so
fun.
Cool. Yeah.
But I would have never found that on my own, and so having places like that are great. And then those places also start to clue you into the like actual needs of your city. Because I like personally the ethic that I hold is if I'm gonna live here and work here and play here, I also need to like serve here. Yeah. And so as much as I'm like looking towards those resources as a place to find things to engage in to do, I'm also like looking to find places to serve and needs to meet. And the longer you're in a city and you're putting yourself out there, going to events and showing up and being a part of the culture, the more you start to see that there's like an underbelly of people who don't get to participate in those things because they don't have the means to, they don't have the access to. And I want to like be a door to create access for other people who don't have it. And part of that is like we have to alleviate our poverty situation to make those things accessible for everyone. Yeah. And so I want to spend just as much time working on those issues as I do like participating in the fun things in our city. As much as I have the privilege to like be able to go and buy a pass to go to an arts festival, I want a kid who's in 4th grade to know that that's something that they can do now. And so working with organizations to make those things happen, trying to figure out ways to like serve the city in that way. because you can do both, and I think both are important. Like everybody should be thinking about ways to play and enjoy their city,
Yeah.
but also like caring for the people who can't do those things and trying to make doors open for those people as well.
Yeah, that balance of I want to be able to do this and like enjoy it, but I don't want to be the only one that gets to enjoy it.
Yes.
So that's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's a good thought, and that's awesome that like those are ways that you can like I can look at the cool things to do, but I can also help others find those cool things to do and other ways to help them, just get a little bit off the ground.
Yeah.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed Kori and I talking about ways to participate and be involved in your city and in your community. Hopefully that was kind of a stirring conversation for you. The good part about this is part 2 of that conversation is going to be out way sooner than you think, possibly even by the time you're done listening to this episode. So I will see you next time on that, and hopefully you enjoy part 2 as well. I'll see you next time.